Today we're going to be focusing on scientific literacy, and this is lesson 2 of chapter 2 in your yellow Pearson science book. And our essential questions for this lesson are: why is scientific literacy important? How do you analyze scientific claims? How do you research scientific questions? And we're going to start with a fun fact. Why do you need to know? If you watch TV crime programs, then you know that investigators often use DNA testing to solve a case. How does DNA testing help? Scientists can identify people by examining their DNA. A person's DNA is unique, like a person's fingerprint. In the future, you may need more information about DNA evidence than what is given in TV programs. For example, if you are selected to sit on a jury in a trial that uses DNA evidence, you will want to know scientific details about DNA to make your decision. And our question that goes along with this fun fact is: a DNA sample links an accused suspect to a crime. Suppose there is a 1 in 10 million chance that the DNA sample comes from someone else. How would this affect your decision as a juror? And right now I want you to pause the video and I want you to answer that question on page 42 in your yellow science book. How would knowing that the DNA does not match the person being accused of the crime, how would that affect your decision as a juror? So you're going to pause the video and you're going to answer that question. Yeah, I know you didn't pause the video, so pause it now. This is your last chance. Pause the video and answer that question. All right, now that you had some time to answer that question, I'm sure you wrote down something similar to: I would want to know about the other evidence before I decide. If DNA is the only evidence, someone else could have done the crime. But all of your answers are valid because it is a how would this affect your decision, not a what is the correct answer type of question. And now we're going to move on to: why is scientific literacy important? Suppose someone asked you to sign a petition to protect the Canada geese in your town. People are trying to keep the geese away from our parks, he says. A person standing nearby says, but the geese make an awful mess. You're confused. You know you need to learn more about the issue. And that is where scientific literacy comes in hand. So scientific literacy. To understand the many issues you encounter, you need scientific literacy. Scientific literacy means understanding scientific terms and principles well enough to ask questions, evaluate information, and make decisions. By having scientific literacy, you will be able to identify good sources of scientific information, evaluate them for accuracy, and apply the knowledge to questions or problems in your life. Evidence and opinion. To evaluate scientific information, you must first distinguish between evidence and opinion. In science, evidence includes observations and conclusions that have been repeated. Evidence may or may not support a scientific claim. An opinion is an idea that may be formed from evidence but has not been confirmed by evidence. In Figure 1, try separating evidence from opinion. So let's take a look at Figure 1. I'm going to zoom in so we can see it a little bit better. And here we go. Figure 1. It says evidence and opinion. Should your town try to keep Canada geese away from the parks? Distinguish evidence and opinion. Under each statement in the boxes, label the statement as evidence or opinion. So in this first picture, we have geese spend up to 12 hours a day eating grass and roots. And in the second picture, we have geese are too messy. So which one of these pictures and statements is evidence and which is an opinion? I want you to pause the video and take about 30 seconds to write your answer right in your book on page 43. So please do that now. Now that you've had some time to write down your answers, I'm assuming, I really hope you paused the video and did as I said, but who knows? This first picture, geese spend up to 12 hours a day eating grass and roots. That is evidence. That is a fact. We could look it up. We could find it. That is evidence. And then geese are too messy is just an opinion. That is someone's opinion, because not all people might think that geese are too messy. So the first one is evidence, and the second one is opinion. All right, let's move on. So now that we can distinguish between evidence and opinion, let's talk about how we analyze scientific claims. So scientific literacy gives you the tools to analyze scientific claims. Scientific reasoning gives you the process. You can use scientific reasoning to analyze scientific claims by looking for bias and errors in the research, evaluating data, and identifying faulty reasoning. So let's take a look at figure 2. So it says, analyzing scientific claims, read about this research and think about the researcher's conclusion, then answer the question in the box. So we have, a researcher needs to find out if people in a town have good computer skills. The researcher advertises online for participants to take the test. He offers a free thumb drive as a payment. The second panel, we have 20 people take the test. Everyone gets a perfect score. In the third panel, we have the researcher concludes that the town's residents have excellent computer skills. So in this first box, we're going to identify experimental bias. What is an important source of experimental bias in this research? So let's look back at our comic, and we can see in this first comic that it says that he needs to find people in town if they have good computer skills. So he advertises online for participants to take the test, and he offers a free thumb drive as payment. So the experimental bias in this example is actually going to be the fact that he only advertised online. So the only place somebody could see this ad for this test was online. So our experimental bias is the only place to see the ad was on a computer. The person had to be online. They couldn't go to the library, to the post office and see it. They had to be online. In order to get a good group of people, he should have posted this ad in multiple places, not just online. And then we have analyzed sources of error. What is an important source of error in this research? So if we look at panel 2, it says 20 people took the test and everyone got a perfect score. I don't know how many people live in his town, but I'm sure it's more than 20 people. So the fact that he only tested 20 people is the error in this particular example. He should have had more than 20 people in his test. So not enough residents were tested to be able to draw a conclusion. So our experimental bias was that he only advertised online, and our error, our source of error, is that he only had 20 people. And remember, when we are running some sort of scientific experiment, we want to try our best to avoid experimental bias and error. So now that we've talked about evidence, opinion, and how to analyze scientific claims, let's look at our apply it questions. So read the sample advertisement, then use scientific reasoning to analyze its claims. So we can see that we have an advertisement that says, improve your test scores, a scientifically proven new way to get better grades. Just look at our research results. Subject A studied for 30 minutes in front of the TV and didn't use our product, scored 72 points. Subject B studied for 3 hours with a tutor and used know-how, scored 90 points. That means 25% higher grades with know-how. You can make the grade, order know-how today. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to answer questions 1, 2, and 3 on your own before we discuss the answers. So go ahead, pause the video. Really pause it this time. I know you didn't pause the video, so I would suggest pausing the video and answering the questions in your book on page 45. All right, welcome back. I really hope you actually paused the video to answer these questions. Our first question says, how many subjects were in the study? We're looking at our lovely ad over here. It says subject A and subject B. So I can conclude that only 2 subjects were in this study. That's probably not super fantastic. So for number 1, we have 2. 2 subjects were in the study. And for number 2, we have evaluate scientific claims. Do the research results support the claim that using know-how helps people get better grades? Explain your answer. So we can see that they tested 2 people. Subject A he only studied for 30 minutes and it was in front of the TV and scored a 72. Subject B studied for 3 hours with a tutor and used know-how, and he scored 90 points. So they're claiming that if you use know-how, you're going to score 25% higher than people who don't use it. So, does the research result support their claim? No. Why, you ask? I'm glad you asked. Because only 2 people were tested. So in order to see if what they're saying is actually true, they need to have more than 2 people in their test group. So the answer to number 2 is no, because only 2 people were in this study and variables such as time, study environment, and support were not controlled. So there were too many unknown factors and there was not enough people for the research to support their claim. In question 3, was subject B's score actually 25% higher than subject A's score? Calculate. All right, well, in order to do that, we would have to see what 25% of 72 is, and if we do that, we get 18. If we add 18 to the score of 72, we get 90. So that part was actually true. Based on those 2 people, 25% higher grades with know-how. So the answer to 3 was yes, because that is 25% higher. All right, so we've talked about evidence, opinion, and how to analyze scientific claims. So now we're going to talk about how do you research scientific questions. Chances are you will need to answer scientific questions to make decisions in your life. For example, suppose you injure your knee and the doctor gives you a choice of treatments. You need to do research before deciding. In science, you also need to do research to design an experiment. To make decisions and design experiments, you need relevant and reliable background information. Relevant information is knowledge that relates to the question. Reliable information comes from a person or organization that is not biased. Generally, universities, museums, and government agencies are sources of reliable information. So are many nonfiction magazines and educational websites. Look at the sources in Figure 3. Before we do that, we're going to use the vocabulary. It says use context to determine meaning. Underline the phrase in the text that helps you understand the word relevant. So if we look, it says relevant information is knowledge that relates to the question. And when we're looking for context, that's probably going to have to do with part of the sentence. And this particular sentence starts with relevant information, and then it says is. So after the word is, we know that knowledge that relates to the question is in fact the definition that we are looking for when we are using our context. We're going to go ahead and highlight or underline that part in your book. So knowledge that relates to the question. So please underline, highlight, circle that part of the sentence. Now let's look at Figure 3, evaluating sources of information. Evaluate data reliability. Circle the most relevant and reliable source of information for your research about water use in your community. Explain your choice below. So we have all about water use. How much do you know about the water you use? Take this quiz by Mr. Pickle's 6th grade class. Effective water rate increases on reducing water sewage in Sydney, NSW Government Australia. And lastly, we have water usage by county, your state government office of water resources and conservation. So which one do we think is the most relevant to us? So let's look at it. Let's look at the first one, all about water use. Take a quiz designed by 6th graders. I don't know about you, but I don't know if that's quite as relevant as it should be. I don't know if I would want to take a quiz by 6th graders about water use. You probably also don't, and you are 6th graders. So I'm going to go with this first one, not super relevant. Let's look at the second one. Now, this does say it's from the NSW government, but it's in Australia. Do we live in Australia? No, we sure don't. We live in the United States of America, so we don't really want the second one because we don't live in Australia, so who cares? So that means that the last one, let's look at it. Water usage by county. Your state government office of water resources and conservation. That for us is going to be the most relevant because it is going to be water usage in our county by our state government in the United States. So this site is relevant because the information is about my community and reliable because it is a government source. So when we're looking for reliable sources, we want it to be relevant, up to date, and something by the government, an education website, not Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a very reliable source. So make sure it is relevant, up to date, and is by some reputable source. All right, and lastly, let's look at all bottled up. How do science and society affect each other? So science and society are interconnected. Circle the boxes that show the work of science, then explain below how the statements in boxes 3 and 4 show how science and other aspects of society affect each other. So let's look at the first one. Clear plastics that could be used to make light, cheap bottles were invented. Is this science connected to society? Did this affect society? It sure did, so go ahead and circle number 1. How about number 2? Manufacturers made plastic bottles for many beverages which people buy. Does this show science? No, because the plastic bottles were already made. So number 2 is not science related. Number 3, empty plastic bottles become litter. Bottle deposit laws encourage recycling empty bottles. Once again, this has nothing to do with science. People were just trying to stop the littering of plastic bottles. Let's look at number 4. Ways to recycle bottles into new safe products were invented. This is science related because ways to recycle, that has to do with science. And safe products, also science. So circle number 4. Number 5, people bought products made from recycled bottles. Cool, but doesn't have anything to do with science. And the last one, bottles that use 30% less plastic were designed. Once again, number 6 does have to do with science. So we should have circled 1, 4, and 6. And the last part says, explain below how the statements in boxes 3 and 4 show how science and other aspects of society affect each other. So we had empty plastic bottles become litter. So bottle deposit laws encourage recycling empty bottles. And then ways to recycle bottles into new safe products were invented. So this shows how science and society are affected because laws were made to recycle bottles, and as a result, scientists were able to invent products from those recycled materials. And that is the end of lesson 2, and I hope this helped you be able to understand evidence, opinion, how to analyze scientific claims, scientific resources, pretty much anything, and how to research scientific questions and what reliable information actually